So, as I've stated earlier, Kettle Falls not only has a ton of geological history, it has a ton of cultural history. This is an extremely important site, and I should take a moment to recognize whose ancestral homeland we are in right now. This was traditionally the homeland of the Colville Nation. However, there were so many different groups, so many Native American nations that moved through here. It was really a cultural crossroads of sorts for various tribes of the Columbia Plateau and even the Rockies in general as well. The reason this was such a hugely important site to various Native American cultures because it was a huge resource of food. Every year, millions of salmon worked their way up this river. And this was a choke point for those salmon. They had to make their way over those rapids to continue on upstream in order to be able to spawn. In the summer months between June and October, nations from all over the Pacific Northwest would come here to engage in the fishing. There was actually a lot of organization to this fishing. There was a man that was in charge of how those resources were distributed, and he was the salmon chief. David Thompson, who was an explorer that came through here in about 1811 or so, describes the salmon chief of setting the rules for the fishing for all the different tribes that showed up. One of the things that was mentioned was that they would always allow a great deal of salmon to continue up past the falls before they would even start fishing to ensure that there was enough fish for the subsequent next year's run. We also know that there were Native American nations that had been using this fishing area for really thousands of years. In fact, the historical record, the archaeological record, goes back over 9,000 years in this area. That means they have found artifacts and other evidence that points to the fact that this has a long history of human occupation. Now, one of the neatest elements or artifacts of this human occupation is actually right over here. And it's this rock. This is called the Sharpening stone here. Let me give you a little geological history real quick. This stone doesn't belong here. It doesn't belong here because it doesn't really fit in with the rest of the rocks here, which begs the question, how did it get here? Well, we know that this rock is what we call a glacial erratic, which means it was either carried here inside on top or kind of rolled up underneath of a glacier as it came down out of Canada. And when that glacier started to melt off and recede, this rock was left behind. The reason this rock was culturally important is because this rock is different than the other rocks in the area, and it has a very fine grain in the rock surface itself, which means it works really well to sharpen things. And this stone has been used to sharpen knives, spear points, fishing tackle, various tools for thousands of years. In fact, if you look, you can see all the different grooves in this rock where people for centuries have sharpened their tool. Now, this rock actually used to be down along the river. However, in the 1930s, as they were getting ready to flood out this valley, they actually moved this rock up to higher ground in order to preserve this piece of cultural history. But I like to look at this and just think about all the people that have probably touched this rock over hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's really something to check out, and this video probably doesn't do it justice. So if you're ever going through Kettle Falls on your way over to Republic or Anchelium, you can turn off on the St. Paul's Mission Road and check this site out for yourself. But anyways, a really cool site, and like I said, this was a tremendously important site to the Native American nations who came here every year to harvest salmon, and subsequently is an extremely important part of the culture of the Native Americans of this region. Thank you.